The Force is light and full of shadows.
Before we dive in, check the link in the description if you want exclusive Timelines members-only videos you won't find on YouTube, all on our Patreon. The Chancellor's private office exists at the top of the world, 500 levels above Coruscant's street-level poverty, above the transit lanes and the neon and the 10 trillion lives stacked beneath it like sediment. The Republic Executive Building rises until it punctures cloud cover. At its peak, behind blast-rated transparent steel and walls that have never known a recording device, Sheev Palpatine has governed a galaxy for 13 years. Tonight, the office smells of old wood and ozone. Anakin Skywalker stands just inside the door. He came alone. No comm to Mace, no report to the Council, no warning to anyone. Because the moment Obi-Wan's voice had reached him through the encrypted channel 3 hours ago. Low and careful and stripped of everything except precision. Anakin had understood that this was not a moment for institutions. Palpatine is Darth Sidious. 6 words. Obi-Wan had only needed 6. And something in Anakin's chest, not the Force, not instinct, something older than both, had gone very still. He did not run to the office. He walked. He thought. He arrived certain. Palpatine stands at the window now, hands clasped behind his back, watching the city bleed light into a darkening sky. He hasn't turned around. He knew Anakin was coming before the turbolift reached the floor. Anakin could feel that awareness radiating off the old man like heat off a hull plate. That subtle Sith attention that he now understands he has been marinating in for 13 years without ever naming it. I wondered, Palpatine says, which version of you would come through that door. His voice is still the Chancellor's voice. Warm, paternal, the voice that has called Anakin's son so many times the word has worn grooves in him. Anakin doesn't answer. Palpatine turns. And the face that turns is not the Chancellor's face, or rather it is. And that is the horror of it. Nothing physically changes. The same pale eyes, the same slight smile, the same careful hands. Only the quality of the attention shifts, the way a predator shifts when it stops pretending the thing across from it is not prey. You've spoken to Kenobi, Palpatine says. Not a question. He found the transmitter array on Utapau, Anakin says. The one routing Separatist command traffic through a Republic relay station. The one using your personal encryption key. Ah, a small sound. Almost fond. He always was thorough. Anakin's hand rests at his side, 2 inches from his lightsaber hilt. His fingers are loose, his breathing is even. In the Force, he can feel Palpatine reading him, testing the space between them for fear, for rage, for the specific emotional frequency that has always been Anakin Skywalker's vulnerability and Darth Sidious's instrument. He feels neither fear nor rage. He feels clear. You're going to tell me, Palpatine says, moving slowly away from the window, that you've come to arrest me, that the Council has been informed, that there are Jedi in the building. No. The old man stops. There are no Jedi in the building. Anakin says, the Council doesn't know I'm here. No one does. Something shifts in Palpatine's expression. The warmth doesn't vanish, it recalibrates, becomes something more genuine and therefore more dangerous. He looks, for a moment, actually pleased. Then you've come to listen, Palpatine says. Good, sit down, my boy. Let me explain what I've built. Let me show you what we can, you engineered the war. The sentence lands flat. Anakin doesn't say it as an accusation. He says it the way a mechanic identifies a failed component. Here is the broken part. Here is what it cost. Here is what comes next. Both sides, Anakin continues. The banking clan's financing of the Separatist droid foundries. The Trade Federation's blockade of Naboo. Your own homeworld, which you used to manufacture a political crisis that put you in the Chancellor's seat. The clone army commissioned a decade before the war began, from a template you arranged, with inhibitor chips you designed, to kill every Jedi the moment you gave the order. He watches the old man's face. Nothing flickers there that wasn't already present. You were going to have me do it. Kill Obi-Wan. Kill them all. And I was going to. You still could, Palpatine says quietly. You still should. The Jedi are a calcified order clinging to a dying philosophy, and Padmé is dying, Anakin, she is dying, right now. Tonight. And the only power in the galaxy that can save her is dark side force healing. Anakin's voice doesn't change. The same power Darth Plagueis supposedly discovered. Which you claim you can teach me. Which requires me to become your apprentice. Which requires me to kill my friends first. He tilts his head slightly. Did you actually believe that sequence would work on me twice? Palpatine goes still, and Anakin understands, in that stillness, the precise nature of the miscalculation. The old man had run the model 1,000 times. He knew Anakin's fear for Padmé. He knew the grief sitting in Anakin's chest like a splinter working toward the heart. He had built an entire architecture of seduction around that single point of pressure, had spent a decade applying incremental weight to it, had been so certain of his own engineering that he never genuinely considered the possibility that the structure might simply not hold. He oversold his hand. He assumed that love made a man weak. He never understood that love, at a certain depth, makes a man quiet. I want you to hear me say this, Anakin says, and he ignites his lightsaber. The blue blade fills the dark office with cold light. I'm not doing this because I hate you. I'm not doing this because the Council ordered it, or because Republic law demands it. I'm doing it because you have spent 13 years treating every living being in this galaxy as a variable in your equation. Because there are 6 million clone soldiers with chips in their heads waiting to murder on your command. Because Padmé Amidala has spent years fighting to save a democracy you hollowed out one vote at a time. The blade doesn't waver. His hand doesn't waver. And because you were right about one thing. I am the most powerful Jedi alive. I just don't intend to use that for you. Palpatine's hands come up. Lightning crackles at his fingertips, and Anakin is already moving. He doesn't duel. There is no exchange of blades, no theatrical back and forth, no room given for the old man to speak again or recalibrate, or reach for the specific word that might still find the splinter in Anakin's chest. The Force is a wall and then a vice. Palpatine's wrists lock in telekinetic restraint. The lightning discharges into the ceiling, scorching stone, and Palpatine staggers. Genuinely staggers. Off balance for perhaps the first time in decades, and Anakin's blade completes its arc in a single clean stroke. The body of Sheev Palpatine, Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Republic and Dark Lord of the Sith, folds to the floor of his private office. No cry. No final words. The room goes quiet so completely that Anakin can hear the city, 500 levels below, continuing without pause. He deactivates the blade. He doesn't look at the body. He crosses to the Chancellor's private terminal, presses Palpatine's still warm thumb to the biometric reader, and begins harvesting. Finance records, communication logs, command codes, encryption keys, the digital bones of 13 years of constructed power, and underneath them, underneath all the careful redactions and buried transmissions, the genuine record of a genuine crime. Palpatine really did manipulate both sides of the war. Anakin doesn't have to fabricate the evidence, he only has to edit what he releases, shaping the record the way water shapes stone, selectively, patiently, leaving only what he needs the Senate to see. He does not think of himself as lying. He thinks of himself as solving the problem completely. It takes 40 minutes. The Coruscant skyline moves from purple to black outside the transparasteel window. When the transfer is done, Anakin straightens and looks at the city for the first time. All those lights, all those lives, all that machinery grinding forward into a morning that doesn't know yet what has changed. Anakin Skywalker didn't kill Palpatine as a Sith. He killed him as a Jedi, who had run out of patience for men who play with the lives of others. The distinction will matter to him, for a while. He presses the comm on the Chancellor's desk and asks for Mace Windu. Mace Windu sweats through his robes. This is the first thing Anakin notices when the Vice Chair arrives at the Executive Building 3 minutes after the comm call. Not the Chagrian's political instincts, not the calculation behind his eyes, not the decades of bureaucratic survival that have kept him at Palpatine's right hand through every crisis and manufactured emergency the old man engineered. All of that is present. But what leads is the sweat, dark patches spreading at the collar of ceremonial robes worth more than a Coruscant family's annual food ration, and the particular quality of stillness a man adopts when he understands that the wrong word will end him. Anakin has positioned himself behind the Chancellor's desk. He didn't plan it consciously. He crossed to examine the terminal a second time, heard the turbolift, and simply didn't move. Now Mas Amidala stands inside the door, deliberately left open, the body of Palpatine visible on the floor behind a deliberately placed chair, not hidden, not staged, just present as fact, and looks at Anakin sitting in the most powerful seat in the galaxy, with the calm expression of a man who has been sitting in powerful seats his entire life. Vice Chair, Anakin says. General Skywalker. Amidala's voice is steady. The rest of him is not. His head tendrils move with the involuntary micro-tremors of a nervous system overloaded with threat assessment. His eyes go to the body, to the desk, to Anakin, back to the body. The Chancellor was Darth Sidious. Anakin places a data chip on the surface of the desk and slides it forward 6 centimeters. 40 years of encrypted records. Financial coordination with the Trade Federation dating to the Naboo blockade. Direct communication logs with Count Dooku. The biometric authorization keys for Order 66, a clone army kill switch he designed to murder every Jedi in the Republic simultaneously. He lets the silence run for 3 seconds. He was going to use it this week. Amidala doesn't reach for the chip. He stares at it the way a man stares at a thermal detonator someone has placed politely on a table between them. I need to know, Anakin says, whether you knew. The question is not a question. It is a calibration instrument, and they both understand this. Amidala has spent 30 years surviving proximity to one of the most dangerous beings alive. He knows exactly what is happening in this room. A new gravity has established itself, and everything that existed in the old gravity, titles, protocols, political alliances, the entire accumulated infrastructure of his relevance, is currently in free fall, and the only solid surface available is the man behind the desk. I did not know, Amidala says. Precise, immediate. The answer of a man who understands that hesitation reads as guilt and guilt reads as a second body on the floor. Anakin looks at him for a long moment. Then he nods, once, and picks the data chip back up. The Republic has no chancellor, Anakin says. It has a vice chair, a Senate in session in 9 hours, a war that technically continues, and a grand army whose authorization codes just changed. In that order, those are the 4 problems we solve before dawn. He stands. You will convene an emergency session. You will announce that Chancellor Palpatine was discovered to have been operating as a Separatist collaborator and enemy of the Republic. The evidence is on that chip, and it is real, and it will hold, and that he died resisting apprehension. You will invoke Senate Emergency Continuity Resolution 7743 and formally delegate provisional executive authority to me as the Republic's senior military officer until the Senate ratifies a formal appointment. He moves around the desk. You do this because it is the correct legal procedure, and because the alternative to a controlled transition is 9 hours of panic. 6 million soldiers with no commander, and a Senate that will tear itself apart before breakfast. Amidala stands very still. You've thought about this, the vice chair says. I've had 40 minutes. The Senate chamber at dawn holds 10,000 beings and sounds like the inside of a pressurized hull about to fail. Anakin stands at the Chancellor's pod, Palpatine's pod. The word Palpatine's already beginning its quiet erosion toward the Chancellor's, toward his, and looks out at the concentric rings of representatives and the noise they produce and feels. Beneath the noise, the specific frequency of a crowd that is frightened and looking for somewhere to put the fear. He knows this frequency. He has heard it in clone battalions before a drop, in Senate galleries during Separatist bombardment alerts, in his own chest on more nights than he will ever account for. He knows what it needs. It needs a voice that isn't afraid. He speaks without a prepared text. The man who sat in this chair, Anakin, begins, and the chamber drops by 20% because the hero of the Republic sounds different than they expected. Quieter, less triumphant, more tired in a way that feels like honesty. Spent 40 years building the Republic's trust so that he could spend it all at once. He manufactured the war. He funded both armies, He designed the mechanism that would have killed every Jedi Knight in the galaxy on his personal command. He pauses, not for effect, because the weight of the thing requires a breath. He would have done it this week. The chamber produces a sound that is not quite language. I found him, Anakin says. I went to his office alone because I didn't know who else to trust. And I found him. And I made a choice that I will spend the rest of my life accounting for. I killed a man. I killed the Chancellor of the Galactic Republic. And I am standing in front of you now instead of before a tribunal, because the Vice Chair and I agreed that the Republic cannot afford a leadership vacuum while the evidence is adjudicated, and because I am asking you, not commanding, not decreeing, asking, to grant me the authority to finish what needs finishing. Senator Bail Organa of Alderaan sits in his pod with his hands folded and his face carefully neutral, watching. He has the expression of a man running legal text in his head at high speed, cross-referencing everything he is hearing against everything he knows, and finding the architecture sound, finding it too sound, which is a different problem entirely. He files the concern and listens. End the war, Anakin says. Bring the clones home. Dismantle the Separatist command structure, which is now leaderless and fractured because Dooku is dead, and the man who funded him is dead. These are not political tasks. They are military ones, and they require a single commander with clear authority and no committee between the decision and the action. He looks out at the rings, at the 10,000 beings, at the fear looking for somewhere to land. Give me 90 days. I will end this war. Then we hold a free election, a real one, with international observers and a reformed Senate Oversight Committee. And I will stand in it as a private citizen and let the Republic decide what it wants. He means it. This is the most important fact of this moment, the one that makes the speech work, the one that Bail Organa and Padmé Amidala and the 17 other senators who will spend years trying to reconstruct the mechanics of this hour will never fully resolve. Anakin Skywalker means every word. He genuinely intends 90 days. He genuinely intends the election. The emergency is real, the danger is real, and his belief in his own good intentions is as complete and unexamined as it has ever been. The vote is not unanimous. But it is enough. Chancellor Pro Tempore Skywalker. Full executive and martial authority. Duration. The resolution of the Separatist threat and the scheduling of a free election to be held, the language reads, as soon as conditions safely permit. Bail Organa votes yes. He votes yes because the alternative is chaos, and because Anakin is not Palpatine, and because the evidence on that data chip is real, and because he tells himself he will watch, he will monitor, he will hold the line. He notes the phrase as soon as conditions safely permit. He notes it, and votes yes, and files the notation somewhere behind his sternum, where it will live for a very long time. In the Chancellor's office, his office now, the possessive completing its migration in the space of 8 hours, Anakin stands at the window. The city is waking below him. Transports and commuters and the vast anonymous machinery of 10 trillion lives moving through their morning without knowing yet what has shifted above them. He put his hand on a door this morning and the door opened. He understands, with his mechanic's clarity, that the door opened too easily, that a door which opens this easily is either unlocked or has been waiting. He doesn't pursue the thought. There is work to do. The Republic Military Intelligence Complex sits 40 levels below Coruscant's surface. No natural light reaches it. The architects didn't try to simulate any. What they built instead is a cathedral of function, gantried walkways suspended above server banks, the size of city blocks. Blue-white running lights tracing the geometry of every conduit and relay node. The air kept at a temperature 2 degrees below comfortable because the hardware requires it, and the personnel are expected to adapt. It smells of recycled atmosphere and hot metal and the particular sterile sharpness of systems that have been running without interruption for so long that the concept of off has become theoretical. Anakin arrives without announcement at 0340 hours. He told no one he was coming. He filed no itinerary with the newly forming Chancellor's security detail. Ignored 2 comm requests from Mace Windu's office, and took a civilian speeder from the executive building's lower garage rather than the official motorcade that has been, in the space of 12 hours, assembling itself around him like a shell forming around something soft. He needed to think. He needed to move without the weight of the apparatus that is already, with the efficient hunger of all bureaucracies, beginning to encrust itself around the new power source it has identified. The base commander, a Colonel Tarvin, meets him at the security threshold with the expression of a man who received a 30-second warning that the Chancellor pro tempore was inbound and has spent all 30 seconds achieving a version of composed that fools no one. "Chancellor," Tarvin says. "Colonel." Anakin hands him a data cylinder, Palpatine's command codes, reformatted under the new authorization architecture, carrying the legal weight of the Senate's emergency resolution. "I need access to the Order 66 relay infrastructure. The full stack, broadcast hardware, biometric authorization chain, the chip command architecture, and its uplink to Kamino's central cloning administration." He watches the colonel process this. Tonight, Tarvin looks at the cylinder. He looks at Anakin. He has the expression of a man who has just understood that the ground beneath a structure he has spent his career maintaining has changed composition. "Sir," he says carefully, "that system is classified at the highest." "I know what it's classified at," Anakin says. "I have Palpatine's codes. I have Senate emergency authority. And I have a reason that I'm going to explain to exactly one person in this building, which is you. Because you're going to oversee what I'm about to do, and I need you to understand why." He holds the colonel's gaze. 6 million clones. Brain implants installed without their knowledge or consent, containing a kill order against the Jedi that the dead man on the floor of the executive building was planning to trigger this week. You've been maintaining the broadcast infrastructure for a weapon pointed at 300 Jedi Knights and 6 million human beings simultaneously. He lets that sit. That ends tonight. The server room at the complex's deepest level is the size of a Senate rotunda and twice as cold. Anakin stands at the central access terminal with Colonel Tarvin at his shoulder and 2 technicians who have been pulled from their bunks and are performing the specific variety of efficient professionalism that people perform when they are operating on adrenaline and the certain knowledge that their careers will survive, or end based on what happens in the next several hours. The architecture is elegant. Anakin hates that it's elegant. He hates that whoever designed this, some Kaminoan bioengineer contracted through 12 layers of deniable intermediaries, feeding a design brief that was itself classified. Working from specifications that were almost certainly never formally attributed to anyone, clearly knew exactly what they were building and built it well. The Order 66 relay infrastructure is not crude. It is precise. A targeted broadcast system capable of reaching every active chip and every clone trooper in the Grand Army simultaneously. Keyed to a specific biometric and authorization code combination, designed to trigger a behavioral override that bypasses personality, loyalty, and individual will in favor of a single compulsory action: kill the Jedi. Anakin navigates it the way he navigates a damaged hyperdrive, not with reverence, not with hesitation, but with the focused attention of someone who has been reading mechanical systems since he was 4 years old and has never encountered one he couldn't eventually understand. He finds the trigger architecture first, isolates it, examines the command structure the way a surgeon examines tissue. Here is the pathology. Here is where it connects to healthy function. Here is the cut that removes it without taking anything necessary with it. He works for 40 minutes in silence, and Colonel Tarvin watches, and neither of the technicians speaks, and the only sounds are the server banks breathing their cold mechanical breath and the tap of Anakin's fingers on a keyboard. Then he stops. He doesn't delete the trigger architecture. He sits with his hands over the keyboard and his eyes on the screen, and he thinks, with the precise, uncomfortable honesty that has always been both his strength and his wound, about what he is actually doing. He came here to free the clones, to remove a death sentence installed in their skulls without their knowledge. That intention is real, and the impulse behind it is the cleanest thing he has done in the last 12 hours. But the removal is not all he's doing. He's also replacing the command architecture, installing a loyalty anchor, binding 6 million soldiers to his personal genetic signature and authorization key, above and outside Senate command structure. answerable to him and to no invocable order or democratic process except him. He is simultaneously freeing the clones from one man's absolute control and placing them under his own. He notices this. He sits with it for 11 seconds. Then he completes the overwrite, because the alternative, leaving Order 66 intact, leaving any version of that trigger accessible to any future hand, is not something he is willing to do. The consolidation of loyalty is a problem he will manage. The genocide architecture is a problem he will eliminate. These are not equivalent problems. He tells himself this. And it is true, and it is not the whole truth. And he knows both of these things and proceeds. The deletion takes 3 minutes once he has decided. The loyalty overwrite takes 22. When it is finished, Anakin straightens and looks at Tarvin. It's done, he says. Order 66 cannot be issued by anyone. The broadcast architecture has been stripped at the hardware level. Your technicians will need to physically remove the relay components from every relay station in the network. And I want that completed within 72 hours. I'll have authorization orders cut before I leave this building. He pauses. The clones still have a loyalty protocol in the chip architecture. It now answers to my personal authorization and no one else's. That is not public information. Tarvin absorbs this with the stillness of a man who has filed something in a compartment he does not intend to open often. Understood, sir, he says. Commander Vane becomes aware of the change at Oro 6 temp hours, 4 levels above, in the transit barracks where the 501st's Coruscant garrison is housed between rotations. He doesn't have language for it. That is the first thing. There is no language, because the change doesn't arrive as information. It arrives as a quality of something that has always been present, shifting its character, without announcing that it shifted. He has felt loyal to the Republic for as long as he has existed. He has felt loyal to the Jedi officers he has served under. He has felt loyal to General Skywalker in a way that always carried a different weight than the others, something warmer and more specific. The way a current runs faster in a narrower channel. Now the channel is the only thing. Everything else is still present. His sense of self, his memories of Christophsis and Umbara and the cold misery of Kamino's reign, his opinions about field rations and the quality of the 212th officers relative to the 501st's, all of it intact, all of it available. Just underneath all of it, where duty used to live as an abstraction, something has set like concrete around a single point. He sits on the edge of his bunk in the blue pre-dawn light of the barracks and tries to name the feeling. The closest he gets is, it used to feel like duty. Now it feels like devotion. He doesn't know why. He can't locate the difference's origin. After a moment he stands, straightens his blacks, and moves toward the mess hall because the morning rotation begins in 20 minutes, and whatever has changed in the architecture of his loyalty, the 501st still needs to eat. He does not report the sensation to anyone. He isn't sure it would occur to him to report it to anyone. Anakin is in the speeder, ascending through Coruscant's levels toward the surface, when the sun clears the eastern cityscape and floods the Transparistile with morning light. He thinks about the clones. He thinks about 6 million men who woke this morning slightly different than they went to sleep, with no knowledge of the difference and no language for what changed. He thinks, I freed them. He thinks, I freed them into me. The speeder rises. The light gets stronger. He doesn't look away from it. The Separatist Council dies in a conference room on Mustafar. Not by Anakin's hand. This is the detail that matters, the one that separates this timeline from the other one. The one where a man in black armor walks those corridors with a red blade and rage, so complete it has become a kind of peace. In this timeline, the Separatist Council dies by committee, a joint resolution of the newly restructured Republic Military Command, citing the confirmed death of Count Dooku. The confirmed treason of Chancellor Palpatine as the Council's covert financier, and the legal dissolution of the Confederacy of Independent Systems as a recognized political entity under Emergency Wartime Statute 1188. C-clone battalions move on all 14 Separatist holdout systems simultaneously at 0600 hours, 9 days after Palpatine's death. Coordinated with a precision that has the HoloNet military analysts describing it as the most efficiently executed multi-front operation in the history of the Grand Army. What the analysts don't say, because they don't know, is that the coordination is that precise because the army answers to one man, and one man only, and that man spent the preceding 9 days doing nothing except planning it. Anakin doesn't sleep during those 9 days. He doesn't announce this. He moves between the war room and the Chancellor's office, and occasional brief appearances in Senate corridors that his new staff have begun scheduling with the careful choreography of people managing a symbol. And in the margins of all of it, he plans the operation the way he has always planned operations, completely. Without delegating the parts that matter, with a specificity that makes his generals privately uncomfortable because it implies their chancellor understands their jobs better than they do, and is not wrong. The war ends on a Tuesday. The victory address happens at noon in the Senate Plaza, under a sky that Coruscant's atmospheric processors have, for the first time in 3 years, cleared of the particulate haze generated by orbital bombardment deflector shields, running continuously at upper atmosphere. The sky is blue. Genuinely, unambiguously blue, the color of it so unfamiliar after 3 years of gray-orange war haze that several of the journalists positioned in the press gallery stop typing and simply look up for a moment before remembering their jobs. 200,000 people fill the plaza. They have been arriving since before dawn, transit lanes clogged in every direction, the crowd assembling itself with the organic inevitability of water finding level. No one organized this gathering. That is what the new Chancellor's communications staff will tell every journalist who asks, and it is completely true. Which is the thing about Anakin Skywalker's political ascension that keeps Bail Organa awake at 2 a.m. with a glass of untouched Alderaanian wine going warm on his nightstand. None of it has been manufactured. The adoration is real. The relief is real. The war is actually over. The man who ended it is actually standing at the podium. And 200,000 people are expressing a genuine collective emotion that happens to look, from any angle, exactly like the foundation of a personality cult. Anakin speaks for 11 minutes. He thanks the clones first, specifically and by unit, cycling through 23 battalions by name and engagement. The plaza makes a sound like an ocean each time he names a unit whose members are present in the crowd. He thanks the Senate briefly for their trust. He names 4 senators who died in the war, their names, their home systems. One specific thing each of them fought for, and the plaza goes very quiet for those 4 names. The quiet of people who have been told that grief is being witnessed, and can briefly be set down. Then he says, "Come home." 2 words, directed at every clone unit still deployed across 14 systems, broadcast simultaneously on every HoloNet channel in the Republic, carried to relay stations and listening posts and garrison bases and forward operating positions on 37 planets. Come home. The communications team will later spend considerable time debating whether the phrasing was strategic, whether home carries a specific political weight, whether it implies a promise the Republic must now keep, whether Anakin understood its resonance when he said it. He understood its resonance when he said it. He also meant it completely, without political calculation, in the same breath. Both things are true. Both things will always be true of him, and it will never stop being the most complicated fact about his rule. In a private gallery above the plaza, screened from public view by a transparisteel panel with polarized tinting, Padmé Amidala watches her husband address 200,000 people. She has been watching him for 11 minutes with the focused, unreadable expression she deploys in Senate chambers when a speech is making arguments she needs to take apart carefully before she responds. The twins move in her, slow and insistent, and she rests one hand against her side without looking down. Beside her, Bail Organa stands with his arms folded. "The crowd," he says. "I know." Padmé says. "He didn't organize it." "I know that too." A pause. Below them, Anakin finishes speaking, and the plaza produces a sound that is not quite applause. It is something more animal than applause, more total, the sound of relief finding a physical form. The 90-day timeline, Bail says. Padmé doesn't answer immediately. She watches Anakin step back from the podium, watches the security detail close around him, watches the way he moves through the forming cordon with the relaxed awareness of a man who has never in his life been unaware of every exit in a room. "He means it," she says finally. "Today he means it," Bail says. not cruelly. Precisely, Padmé turns to look at him. Bail meets her gaze with the expression of a man who respects her enough to say the true thing. The election requires conditions, he says. He used the phrase himself, as soon as conditions safely permit. The definition of safe conditions is currently at his discretion, as long as the Republic feels threatened, economically, politically, by separatist remnants. By any of 12 other plausible instabilities, the conditions are not safe, and the Republic, he pauses, will feel threatened for a long time. It always does. You're describing a mechanism, Padmé says. Not a man. I'm describing how mechanisms change men. She looks back at the plaza. Anakin has reached the cordon's edge. And something happens at that moment that neither of them could have staged. A clone trooper, one of the 501st Honor Guard flanking the Chancellor's path, reaches out and grips Anakin's arm, not in restraint, not in protocol, just a hand on his general's arm for 1 second, before discipline reasserts itself and the trooper snaps back to attention. Anakin stops. He looks at the trooper. He puts his own hand briefly over the clone's and says something that the crowd cannot hear and the cameras are not close enough to capture. 200,000 people see the gesture without hearing the words, and 200,000 people understand it as evidence of something real, and they are not wrong. And that is the entire problem. I'm going to talk to him, Padmé says. I know, Bail says. He'll listen. Bail says nothing. He looks at the plaza, at the crowd beginning its slow, reluctant dispersal, at the banners someone has hung from the public buildings flanking the square. Not government-issued banners, civilian ones, privately made, bearing Anakin's face above the words, "The war is over." He files several things behind his sternum to join the notation about safely permit. I hope you're right, he says. By nightfall, the HoloNet has a name for the address. Not a name anyone in Anakin's communications office coined or approved. A name that emerged from subspace relay chatter and public commentary feeds, and was simply, by the end of the day, the name the address had. History doesn't wait for official designations. It finds its own language and uses it. They are calling it the come-home speech. In 17 systems, clone units that have been deployed for 3 years pack their equipment and begin their transit back to Coruscant. In 14 former Separatist systems, Republic administrative representatives land with reconstruction mandates and Senate oversight committees, and the careful, necessary machinery of reintegration. On Alderaan, Bail Organa sits in his office with the untouched wine and a document open on his desk, a personal communication to 4 senators he trusts, carefully worded, flagging nothing specific, asking only for a meeting. He doesn't send it tonight. He tells himself he is waiting for more information. In the Chancellor's residence, 3 levels above the executive office, Anakin eats alone at a table set for 2. Padmé is in her Senate apartment. She has not yet moved. They have not yet discussed the logistics of what moving would mean, what it would announce. What weight the optics of the Chancellor's wife residing publicly in the Chancellor's residence would add to a situation already bending under its own gravity. The plate in front of him is untouched. He is looking at the window. Outside, the city is celebrating. Padmé comes to him on a Wednesday, 3 weeks after the victory address, without an appointment. This is itself a statement. She has watched the apparatus form around him with the speed of something that was always waiting to exist. The scheduling staff, the security rotation, the communications office, the endless procession of senators and generals and planetary governors who require 15 minutes of the Chancellor's attention and receive 8 and leave satisfied, because 8 minutes of Anakin Skywalker's. Complete focus feels like more than an hour of anyone else's. She has watched the apparatus form and understood, with the political instinct that has never failed her, that the apparatus has already begun to manage access to her husband the way it manages access to the office, efficiently, impersonally, with the quiet violence of a calendar. So she doesn't use the calendar. She arrives at the private residence entrance at 1900 hours with her Senate credentials and her face, and the particular quality of stillness she carries when she has decided something and is not interested in being redirected. The security detail, 2 clones from the Vanguard rotation, the new designation Anakin has given the Chancellor's personal guard. Look at her and look at each other and open the door. Anakin is standing at the window. He has been standing at the window, she suspects, for longer than he would admit. You didn't come ahead, he says. I wanted to see what you looked like when no one was managing you, she says. He turns. He looks like himself, which is both the relief and the problem. The same face she has loved since she was 14 years old and he was 9 and covered in Tatooine dust. The same eyes that have never learned the diplomatic skill of revealing less than they feel. Exhausted, she reads. Certain, and underneath the certainty, something that has no name yet, but that she has been watching develop for 3 weeks with the focused dread of someone watching a hairline crack in a dam. He looks like a man who is beginning to believe that he is the right person for this. Sit down, she says. Padmé. Sit down, Anakin. He sits. She doesn't. She moves to the center of the room and turns to face him with her hands loose at her sides, and she looks at her husband across the distance of 3 weeks of careful separation and the weight of everything that distance contains, and she says what she came to say. Tell me about the chips. The quality of his stillness changes. Obi-Wan, he says. Obi-Wan told me nothing. I read the military intelligence access logs. She watches his face. The Chancellor pro tempore made an unscheduled visit to the Republic Military Intelligence Complex at 0340 hours, 11 days ago. Accessed the Order 66 relay infrastructure. Spent 4 hours in the server room with Colonel Tarvin and 2 technicians operating under a total information embargo. She tilts her head slightly. The technicians have been reassigned to a listening post in the Outer Rim. Tarvin has been promoted and transferred to Camino with a classified mandate. I don't have clearance to read. She pauses. I'm a senator. Anakin, I have oversight responsibilities for military operations. I don't have clearance to read it. The chips were a genocide architecture, he says. I removed it, and replaced it with what? The question sits in the room with them. Anakin looks at her with the expression of a man who has prepared, privately for this conversation, who has run versions of it in his head and knows that none of the versions resolve cleanly. And who is going to tell her the truth because she is the one person he has never been able to not tell the truth to. And that fact, the stubbornness of his honesty with her even now, is the only thing making her breathe. A loyalty protocol, he says, bound to my personal authorization. The clones answer to me directly, above Senate command structure. Padmé is quiet for a long moment. 6 million soldiers, she says. Yes, loyal to you personally. Not to the Republic. Not to the Senate. To you. The Senate doesn't have the codes to prevent another Palpatine from doing what Palpatine did, Anakin says, and his voice is level, and his reasoning is clean, and that is the problem. That is always going to be the problem. His reasoning is so consistently clean. Someone had to hold that authority. Someone had to be the point of accountability. I made myself the point of accountability. You made yourself the point of control, Padmé says. Those are different things. He doesn't argue. This is one of the things she loves about him, and one of the things that frightens her most in this context. He doesn't argue when she's right. He simply holds the position anyway. The election is in 60 days, he says. The election, she says carefully, requires conditions that you define. The silence that follows has weight to it. Outside the window, Coruscant moves through its evening, lights coming on in layers, the city's vertical geography illuminated from below, beautiful and enormous and indifferent. I will hold the election, he says. I believe you, she says. Today she moves to the chair across from him and sits, and for a moment they are just 2 people in a room, which is so rare now that the ordinariness of it is its own kind of pain. No staff, no scheduling matrix, no apparatus between them, just Anakin and Padmé and the twins shifting their weight in her and the window in the evening city. I'm going to stay in my apartment, she says. He looks at her. Not because I'm leaving you, she says. Because I'm not going to be a symbol for this. I'm not going to stand beside you at podiums and let people photograph the Chancellor and his wife and use that image to make the office feel warmer than it is. She holds his gaze. I am a senator. I have a vote. I intend to use it. I cannot use it freely if I am publicly positioned as your political partner. You are my political partner, he says. You've always been. I've always been your partner, she says. That's different. A partner can tell you that you're wrong. A symbol can't. She leans forward slightly. I'm choosing to be the one who can tell you that you're wrong. I need you to understand what I'm trading for that. He looks at her for a long time. She can see him processing it, not emotionally in the first instance, but tactically. The way his mind always moves first, assessing the structure before it feels the content. And then the tactical assessment completes and the content arrives, and his face does the thing it has always done when something costs him, the slight tightening around the eyes, the specific quality of stillness that means the feeling is present and being held rather than expressed. I understand, he says. There's something else, Padmé says. She has been building toward this. He knows it, she can see that he knows it, the way he has always been able to read her approach the way she has always been able to read his. They have been reading each other for 15 years. The fluency of it is its own country. Bail is organizing, she says. Quietly, he hasn't sent anything formal, no communications I can point to, no meetings on record. But I know Bail Organa, and I know what his quiet looks like when it has a direction. She watches Anakin's face. He's going to push for constitutional reforms, hard limits on executive authority. A formal sunset clause on the emergency powers that doesn't depend on your personal judgment about when conditions are safe. She pauses. He's going to do it publicly, in session, and he's going to do it soon. Good, Anakin says. She blinks. Of everything she prepared for, this was not one of the responses she modeled. It's a legitimate check, he says. If the reforms are sound, I'll sign them. I'm not Palpatine. I don't need the architecture of unlimited authority. I need the war ended and the Republic stable, and Padmé, he says. Her name landing differently than the rest of the sentence. Quieter and more specific. I need you and the children safe. That's the entire list. Everything else is logistics. She looks at him. She thinks. I believe him. She thinks. I believed him 3 weeks ago too, and in 3 weeks the army became his personal instrument. She thinks. I am going to stay. I am going to fight for this from inside, because the alternative is leaving the field to people who won't fight at all. She thinks. I hope I am right, and I am not certain that I am. The children need a name, she says finally. The shift is deliberate. She needs to touch something real and uncomplicated before she leaves. We've been calling them the children for 8 months. Something crosses his face that is not political and not tactical and not the expression of a man managing a galaxy. It is just Anakin. I've been thinking Luke, he says. If one of them is a boy. Luke, she repeats. Tries the shape of it. And if it's a girl? You choose, he says. You've earned it. She stands. She straightens her jacket. She moves toward the door, and at the threshold she stops without turning around. 60 days, she says. Hold the election, Anakin. I'll hold the election, he says. She leaves. He turns back to the window. The city below him is the same city it was before she came, and the night is the same night. But the room feels different in her absence, larger and colder, the way rooms do when the person who makes them real has gone. He stays at the window for a long time. He tells himself, 60 days. He tells himself this the way a man tells himself something he intends to keep believing. The summons arrives at the Jedi Temple on a Thursday morning, delivered not by messenger or personal comm, but by the Republic's official legislative gazette, the same dry bureaucratic publication that announces zoning amendments for Coruscant's lower districts and quarterly adjustments to Senate committee membership rosters. Executive Order 7741. Decommission of Jedi Military Commissions. Mace Windu reads it twice in his quarters before the sun has fully cleared the temple's eastern spires. He reads it the way he reads intelligence reports from contested systems, looking first for what is absent, for the negative space where information has been withheld or shaped. What he finds is worse than crude hostility. The order is clean, legally precise, argued in language that a Senate Judiciary Committee could not meaningfully contest, citing statutes that genuinely exist, precedents that genuinely apply, reasoning that is, in every particular, genuinely sound. Conflict of interest between a religious and monastic order and the command of a standing planetary army. He sets the Gazette down on his desk. He picks it up again. He sets it down again. He has been a Jedi for decades. He has sat on the High Council for 19 years. He has faced Sith Lords and Separatist generals and political crises of sufficient complexity that lesser men would have required months to untangle. He has never in all those years felt the specific variety of helplessness that comes from being defeated by correct paperwork. He calms Yoda. The council chamber holds 12 seats, and this morning it holds 9 masters. 3 of the 12 seats empty, casualties of the war's final campaigns not yet replaced, the vacancies somehow more present than the occupied chairs. Morning light comes through the high windows at the angle that makes the chamber gold. And in that gold light 9 of the most powerful Force sensitives alive sit with the executive order open on datapads, and say very little. Mace speaks first, because someone has to. He has the legal authority, he says, not a concession, a calibration of the problem. Question that is, whether legal authority and right authority the same thing are, Yoda says from his chair, and his voice carries the particular weight it carries when he is not offering wisdom, but requesting it, asking the room to think, rather than telling it what to think. The order is precise, says Master Shakti. It cites the Military Creation Act, the Senate's Emergency Commission statutes, and 3 precedents from the Mandalorian Wars, all of them real, all of them applicable. She pauses. Whoever wrote this knew exactly what they were building. Skywalker wrote it himself, Mace says. No one disputes this. The language around conflict of interest, says Master Ki-Adi-Mundi. Slowly, it's not hostile. It reads as administrative, as though the concern is genuine. The concern may be genuine, Shakti says. That's not the point. The point sits in the room with them, unspoken but present in the way of things that don't require speech. Without Senate military commissions, the Jedi have no formal authority over clone units. Without clone units, the Jedi have no military capacity. Without military capacity, the Jedi are a philosophical institution with lightsabers, respected, perhaps even revered, but possessing no structural power to resist, check, or constrain the man who just ended a 3-year war and has 6 million soldiers bound to his personal loyalty. Yoda's eyes move to the window. The spires of Coruscant rise beyond the glass. Fought this war to protect the Republic we have, he says. To protect what the Republic is, not only what it does. He is quiet for a moment. Asked ourselves, have we, whether protecting what the Republic is requires the instruments of war, or whether the instruments of war have made us something the Republic now fears? The silence that follows is uncomfortable in the specific way of silences that contain true things no one wanted said aloud. We should go to the Senate, Mace says, formally contest the order. We have allies, Organa, Amidala, Mon Mothma. If we make the constitutional case in open session, win the legal argument and lose the political one, Yoda says. Not gently. Precisely, seen how the Senate looks at him, have you? Heard the plaza? Stood in the corridors when he walks through them? He folds his hands on the head of his staff, contest him publicly, and become the obstacle. Become the old order that will not yield. Become the reason the peace is incomplete. He looks at Mace. He is not wrong that the Jedi should not command armies. We were never meant to command armies. That we did so reflects a failure that began long before Skywalker. Master Yoda, Mace says carefully. He has 6 million soldiers answering to him personally. Not to the Senate. Not to any constitutional authority. To him. Aware of this, I am. And the Order's response is to accept the decommission quietly. The Order's response, Yoda says, is to choose the ground on which it stands. This ground, military commission, legal contest, political opposition to a man the galaxy has made into its symbol. This ground we cannot hold. Another ground exists. Anakin receives the Council's formal response at 1100 hours, delivered in person by Master Shakti and a Jedi archivist, no security escort, no political theater. A single document, 3 paragraphs written in the Jedi Order's formal institutional voice, measured, precise, and carrying the specific dignity of something that has decided not to fight the fight it cannot win. The Jedi Order acknowledges Executive Order 7741. The Jedi Order relinquishes all military commissions effective immediately. The Jedi Order formally requests confirmation of its continued legal status as a recognized religious and philosophical institution, and its right to maintain the temple, its archives, its training programs, and its traditional role as peacekeepers, unarmed mediators in civil disputes, acting without military authority, answerable to the Senate Civil Oversight Committee rather than to executive military command. Anakin reads it once. He reads it again. He had prepared, privately, for a fight, had expected Mace Windu's particular brand of principled, hard-edged opposition, the kind that announces itself clearly and stands its ground on visible moral high ground, and forces a confrontation that would need to be managed carefully, politically, with precision. He had even, in the margins of his preparation, rehearsed a version of his response that acknowledged the Jedi's legitimate concerns, while making clear that the Order stood regardless. He had not prepared for 3 paragraphs and a request for confirmation of continued status. He reads the document a third time, and what he is looking for. In the subtext, and between the lines and in the quality of the institutional voice, is recrimination. Anger, the barely contained fury of an order that has been stripped of its power, and knows it. He finds none. What he finds instead is something that is harder to process than anger, a kind of considered yielding that doesn't feel like defeat, because it has clearly decided what it is yielding toward and why, and that decision is not visible in the document, and is therefore not available to him to argue with. He signs the confirmation before lunch. The Jedi retain the temple, the archives, the training programs, and their peacekeeper designation. They lose the clones, the military rank, the command authority, and the structural capacity to resist him. He tells himself this is the correct outcome. The Jedi should never have commanded armies. He believes this. He tells himself that what he is feeling is not satisfaction, and examines the feeling carefully enough to determine that it is not satisfaction, precisely, but something adjacent to it, the specific relief of a man who has removed a variable from a system he is trying to control. He files the signed confirmation and moves to his next appointment. In the council chamber, Mace Windu stands at the window for a long time after the others have left. He watches a squadron of clone vanguard units execute a training formation over the temple district. Precise, coordinated, moving with the specific disciplined beauty of men who have been doing this for 3 years and have not lost the habit of excellence. They are not his soldiers. They were never truly his soldiers. They are Anakin Skywalker's soldiers in a way that is now formal and legal and complete. He thinks about what Yoda said. Another ground exists. He has been turning the phrase over since the council meeting, examining it from different angles, looking for what the old master saw that he is not yet seeing. The temple behind him holds 400 Jedi. Padawans and knights and masters, scholars and healers and diplomats and warriors, the institutional memory of 25,000 years of accumulated wisdom about the Force and the living galaxy, and the question of how power should be held and by whom. None of that is in the decommission order. All of that remains. Mace turns from the window. He picks up his lightsaber from where it rests on the council table, not as a weapon, just holds it. Feels the familiar weight of it in his palm. He thinks, we are still here. He thinks, that will have to be enough. For now, he clips the saber to his belt and walks out of the chamber, into the temple's corridors, into the gold morning light that falls through the high windows and makes the stone floors look like they are made of something that will last. It begins with a Padawan, not a master's calculated gambit, not a council-sanctioned operation, not the principled institutional resistance that Mace Windu has been carefully, quietly building in the margins of the Order's new constrained existence. It begins with a 17-year-old boy, named Das Laren, a Togruta Padawan 3 months from his knighthood trials, who watches a Vanguard clone unit drag a Coruscant lower-level family from their home on level 1333 at 0200 hours for the crime of harboring a former Separatist sympathizer, a charge that, under Executive Supplemental Order 7803, now falls under military jurisdiction rather than civil, and makes a decision that 17-year-olds make when they have been trained since childhood to protect the defenseless, and have not yet accumulated enough history to understand the cost of acting without context. He ignites his lightsaber. He doesn't attack the clones. He positions himself between them and the family and says, in a voice that is steady in the way of voices that are steadier than the body producing them, that this operation falls outside lawful civil procedure, and he is formally requesting the unit stand down, pending Senate oversight review. The clone sergeant calms his superior. His superior calms his superior. The chain of command resolves, in 11 minutes, at the office of the Chancellor's military liaison, who issues a one-line directive: remove the obstacle, minimum necessary force. Das Laren ends up in a Republic detention facility with a broken arm and a formal charge of obstruction of military operations. By morning, 4 other Jedi Knights have presented themselves at the facility demanding his release under the Order's peacekeeper mandate. By afternoon, the HoloNet has the footage: a 17-year-old with a lightsaber standing between 6 clone troopers and a family of 4, the blue blade catching the dim light of level 1313 and making something that, regardless of the legal nuances involved, looks like exactly what it is. A young man deciding that some things matter more than consequences. Mace Windu watches the footage in his quarters and feels 2 things simultaneously: the instinctive Jedi recognition of a brave and correct act, and the strategic dread of a man who has been carefully, quietly choosing his ground, and has just had that choice made for him by someone who didn't know a choice was being made. He calms Anakin before Anakin can calm him. They meet in the Chancellor's office, mid-afternoon, no staff present. Anakin behind the desk, Mace in the chair across from it, the position of a man who has come to a meeting rather than a confrontation, which is itself a statement. The window behind Anakin frames the city. Mace ignores the framing deliberately. Release him, Mace says. The Padawan. He acted within the Order's peacekeeper mandate. Unarmed intervention in a civil matter. The operation was military jurisdiction, Anakin says. He was informed of this. He was 17 years old and watching a family get pulled from their home in the middle of the night. Mace holds Anakin's gaze. Release him, Anakin, as a gesture. The charge serves no one. Something moves through Anakin's expression. Not quite disagreement, not quite concession. He is, Mace understands, calculating, weighing the political cost of the detention against the political cost of the release, and finding, as Mace expected him to find, that the release is cheaper. This is the version of Anakin that has been governing for 60 days, precise, pragmatic, operating with the clean efficiency of a man who has internalized the logic of power so completely he no longer hears the logic as a separate voice. He'll be released by tonight, Anakin says. The charge will be suspended, not dropped. That distinction matters to you. It matters to the precedent. Anakin leans forward slightly. The Order doesn't have military authority. That line exists. I need it to hold. The Order is not contesting the line, Mace says. A 17-year-old boy contested it reflexively because he was watching something that looked wrong. These are different things. They become the same thing when the footage is on every HoloNet channel in the Republic. Then perhaps, Mace says carefully, the operation that generated the footage deserves examination. The quiet between them has a particular quality. 2 men who have known each other for 15 years, who have sat across from each other in council chambers and field briefings and political negotiations, who understand each other's reasoning architecture well enough to have this argument in subtext without fully surfacing it. Anakin knows Mace is not defending the boy so much as defending the category of thing the boy represents. Mace knows Anakin knows this. The conversation is happening on 2 levels and both of them are tracking both levels simultaneously. There will be others, Mace says, not Padawans acting alone. The Order will encounter situations where the military jurisdiction line and the peacekeeper mandate conflict. It will happen again, and when it does, I need a protocol that doesn't end with Jedi in detention. Then establish a protocol, Anakin says. Bring it to the military liaison office. We'll define the jurisdictional boundaries formally so there's no ambiguity in the field. Mace looks at him. You're being reasonable. I'm always reasonable. You're being reasonable in a way that requires me to bring my Order's operational parameters to your office for approval. Mace pauses. That's a different thing than reasonable. Anakin doesn't answer immediately. He looks at Mace with the expression of a man who is deciding how much of what he understands to acknowledge. Yes, he says finally. It is. Das Laren is released at 1900 hours. He walks out of the detention facility with his arm in a med-center splint, and the specific expression of someone who expected worse and is not sure whether or not worse is relief or a different kind of message. Master Plo Koon meets him at the entrance and says nothing except the boy's name, and puts one hand briefly on his shoulder, and they walk back toward the temple without speaking. 3 blocks from the facility, they pass a Vanguard patrol, 4 clones in the Chancellor's distinctive gray and blue Vanguard livery, moving in their practiced formation. The patrol sees the 2 Jedi. One of the clones makes eye contact with Das Laren for a moment, not hostile, not apologetic. Just the flat professional acknowledgement of a soldier noting a presence in his patrol zone. Das Laren looks back. He is trying to understand what he sees in the clone's face. He has fought alongside clones for the last 3 years of this war, has known them by name and by temperament, and by the small individual differences that distinguish one from another in the field. He knows that face type. He has shared rations with that face type, and pulled that face type out of burning gunships, and watched that face type grieve its brothers in the field, with a restraint that costs more than crying does. What he sees in the clone's eyes is not hostility. What he sees is the absence of conflict. The patrol moves on. Das Laren watches it go and tries to articulate what unsettled him in that eye contact, and can't quite reach it. Something about the quality of the loyalty he saw there. Something about the way the soldier's certainty sat in him like a permanent fact rather than a considered commitment. Master Plo, he says. Yes, the clones. Something's different about them. Plo Koon is quiet for a moment as they walk. You feel it in the Force? I don't know what I feel. Something that used to be choice. That isn't choice anymore. Plo Koon says nothing. They walk 2 more blocks in silence before he speaks. Document what you sensed, he says. Write it down tonight, in whatever language you can find for it. Bring it to me tomorrow. You already know what it is, Das Laren says, not accusatory. Certain, I have a theory, Plo Koon says. I want your words, not mine, for the record. The jurisdictional protocol meeting happens 4 days later. Mace Windu and 2 council members on one side of a table in the military liaison office. 3 of Anakin's staff on the other. A document produced over 72 hours of careful negotiation, establishing clear boundaries between military jurisdiction and Jedi peacekeeper operations, with a formal escalation procedure for contested cases. It is thorough. It is fair. It represents a genuine good faith effort by both parties to prevent the kind of incident that put Das Laren in detention. It also requires the Jedi Order to submit operational notifications to the Chancellor's Military Liaison Office before any peacekeeper intervention in areas of active Vanguard deployment. Mace signs it. He signs it because the alternative, no protocol, ongoing ambiguity, more Padawans in detention, is worse. He signs it because the document is defensible, and because it is the best available outcome given the available ground. He signs it and rides the turbolift back up to Coruscant's surface and walks toward the temple in the late afternoon light, and thinks about what Yoda said in the aftermath of the council meeting 3 weeks ago, when Mace had asked him directly, "What is the other ground?" Yoda had looked at him for a long time before answering. "The ground that cannot be signed away," he had said. "The ground inside." Mace walks through the temple gates. The stone is warm from the day's light. Somewhere inside, 400 Jedi are doing what Jedi do when there is no war to fight, studying, meditating, teaching. Maintaining the slow interior work of an order that has survived 25,000 years not because it controlled armies, but because it understood something about the Force that no amount of executive authority can decommission. He thinks, we are still here. He thinks, but here is getting smaller. He thinks, there will come a moment when the protocol is not enough, when the jurisdictional boundary becomes a wall, when a Padawan ignites a blade not in a lower-level district but in this building, on these steps, for a reason that cannot be negotiated away. He doesn't know when that moment is. He knows it is coming. He walks into the temple and lets the doors close behind him, And in the Force, quiet and specific and threaded, underneath everything else. He finds the particular feeling of an order holding its ground and choosing, still, to hold it here. For now, Obi-Wan Kenobi requests the meeting through official channels. This is itself the message, not a private comm, not an encrypted personal transmission on the frequency they have used since Geonosis for things that cannot be said through institutional relays, but a formal written request submitted to the Chancellor's scheduling office, cited under the Jedi Order's Peacekeeper Liaison mandate, requesting 30 minutes of Chancellor Skywalker's time at his earliest convenience. The scheduling office routes it through the standard queue, flags it as high priority given the requester's identity, and places it on Anakin's desk with 17 other requests for the week. Anakin looks at it for a long time before he responds. He responds the same day, which is not standard procedure for any other item on the list. Obi-Wan arrives without his lightsaber. Anakin notices this immediately. The absence registers before the presence. The way a missing instrument in a familiar mechanical assembly announces itself before you've identified which one it is. Obi-Wan sets his empty hands on the arms of the chair across the desk and meets Anakin's gaze with the expression that Anakin has been reading since he was 9 years old and has never fully decoded, warm and measured and containing, always, more than it shows. "Thank you for seeing me," Obi-Wan says. "You didn't have to go through the office," Anakin says. "I thought it was appropriate." A pause. "I wanted to come to you as what I am now, not as what I was." The scheduling office seemed like the honest way to do that. The honest way. Anakin holds the phrase at a slight distance, examining it. "You look tired," Anakin says. "You look like the Chancellor of the Republic," Obi-Wan says. Which is a different kind of tired. For a moment, for just a moment, the office recedes and they are simply themselves. Not Chancellor and Jedi Master, not two men on opposite sides of a line that has been drawing itself with increasing clarity over the past 60 days. Just Anakin and Obi-Wan, which has always been the most complicated relationship either of them has ever had, built from 13 years of shared danger and genuine love, and the specific friction of a master-Padawan bond that became a brotherhood before either of them had language for it. Then the moment closes. "You didn't come to check on my sleep," Anakin says. "No." Obi-Wan looks at his hands briefly, then back up. The protocol agreement. The jurisdictional boundaries. "I want you to know I think it was the right framework and that Mace negotiated it in good faith." "I know he did. And I want you to know that what I'm about to say is not a continuation of that negotiation." Obi-Wan's voice stays level. "It's not institutional. It's not on behalf of the Council. It's me, sitting in this chair talking to you." Anakin waits. "The election," Obi-Wan says. 90 days. You said 90 days. I know what I said. Anakin. The name, not the title. Obi-Wan uses it with a care that announces its own weight. The election has not been scheduled. The conditions for scheduling have not been defined. When Bail Organa asked the Chancellor's office last week for a timeline for the conditions assessment, he received a 14-page document about ongoing Separatist remnant activity in 6 Outer Rim systems, and a polite suggestion that instability in those systems constituted an unresolved threat to the integrity of a free election. Obi-Wan pauses. "Anakin, there will always be instability in 6 Outer Rim systems. That is the permanent condition of a galaxy this size. If that is the bar, I am managing the transition," Anakin says. "The remnant activity is real. The threat assessment is real." "I believe you," Obi-Wan says. "I believe the threat assessment is real. I also believe that you are a man who can find a real threat in any situation. Because real threats exist in every situation, and that this particular talent is going to delay a free election indefinitely, without you ever having to consciously choose to do that." The sentence lands. Anakin doesn't move. "You're describing me as someone who deceives himself," Anakin says. "I'm describing you as someone I've known for 22 years, Obi-Wan says. Who has always been most dangerous when his intentions are purest. Who doesn't need to lie to arrive at a wrong place, who can walk there in perfectly straight lines, following perfectly sound reasoning, and find himself somewhere terrible without a single dishonest step in the journey." The window fills the space behind Anakin with the city's afternoon light. Coruscant moves through its perpetual business below, transports and commerce and 10 trillion lives that are, by every measurable index, safer and more stable than they were 4 months ago. The war is over. Crime statistics are down. The reconstruction of former Separatist systems is proceeding faster than any Senate projection estimated. These are real facts. They are also the facts that a man constructs around himself when he is building a case for why conditions are not yet safe enough to relinquish what he holds. The clones, Obi-Wan says. He says it quietly, with the particular care of a man placing something fragile on a surface he isn't certain will hold it. I've been feeling it in the Force for weeks. Something in their presence has changed. The quality of their loyalty. He stops. Measures his next words. Das Laren noticed it. Plo Koon documented it. I've felt it myself when I pass Vanguard units in the corridors. He looks at Anakin directly. What did you do to them? I removed Order 66, Anakin says. And? The word sits in the air between them. Anakin looks at his former master. At the face that was the first thing he memorized after his mother's when he was 9 years old and the galaxy was suddenly enormous, and the man in front of him was the only fixed point in it, and he tells the truth. Because this is Obi-Wan, and he has never been able to not tell Obi-Wan the truth. And because the truth, here, he still believes, is defensible. I anchored their loyalty to my personal authorization, he says. Above Senate command structure. Obi-Wan is very still. Above Senate command structure, he repeats. It was necessary. The alternative was leaving a kill architecture intact in 6 million skulls. I removed the genocide and replaced it with accountability. With yourself, Obi-Wan says. You replaced it with yourself. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. The quality of his stillness does what volume would do for another man. Anakin, listen to what you're describing. 6 million soldiers loyal to you personally, outside of any constitutional check. An election delayed on conditions you define. A judicial protocol that requires the Jedi Order to submit to your office for operational clearance. He leans forward. I'm not describing Palpatine. I know you're not Palpatine. But I am describing a structure. And structures don't care about the intentions of the man inside them. They only care about what the man inside them can do. I know what I can do, Anakin says. That's why I'm the right person to hold this. The silence that follows is the longest of the meeting. Obi-Wan looks at him with something that is not anger and not despair, and not the carefully managed concern of a former master evaluating a student's error. It is something older and more specific. The expression of a man looking at someone he loves and seeing them clearly, and finding that clarity neither corrects nor condemns, but simply aches. That sentence, Obi-Wan says quietly. That exact sentence. Do you know who else believed it? Anakin's jaw tightens. Don't, he says. I'm not comparing you to him. I'm comparing the sentence. The sentence is the same sentence. Obi-Wan sits back. Every man who has ever held power beyond his right to hold it believed he was the right person to hold it. That belief is not evidence. It is the thing that needs to be checked. It is why we build checks. I am building checks, Anakin says. The Senate oversight reforms, Bale's constitutional amendments. I told Padmé I would support them, and I will. When? When the conditions, Anakin. Obi-Wan says the name the way he has said it 10,000 times across 22 years, not as a reprimand, not as a plea, as a summons. Come back. Come back to yourself. I am still here, and I am calling you by name. Schedule the election. Today, set a date. Define the conditions publicly, specifically, with measurable thresholds that the Senate Oversight Committee verifies. Not your office, the committee. Draw the line yourself, before someone draws it for you. Anakin is quiet for a long moment. Outside, the city moves. Below them, somewhere in the Temple District, a Vanguard patrol makes its circuit. Somewhere in the Republic, in the margins and edges of what used to be contested space, Bail Organa's carefully worded communications are finding their recipients. I did it for them, Anakin says. It comes out quieter than he intended. The galaxy. The clones. Padmé. The children. He pauses. I did all of it for. I know, Obi-Wan says. I know you did. That's not the question. He stands. He has said what he came to say. The question is what for them looks like in 10 years. In 20. When Luke and Leia are grown and the Republic they inherit is the one you're building right now. Today, in every decision you make about conditions and timelines and who the clones answer to. He moves toward the door. At the threshold he stops, and doesn't turn, the same instinct Padmé has, Anakin thinks. The same understanding that some things land harder when the speaker isn't watching. I love you, Obi-Wan says. I have loved you since you were 9 years old, and you have never once made that easy, and I have never once regretted it. A pause. Schedule the election. Anakin, he leaves. Anakin sits in the Chancellor's chair in the Chancellor's office with the Chancellor's city spread out behind him, and he puts his face in his hands for a moment. Just a moment. Just long enough to be, briefly, a man rather than an office. And then he straightens and reaches for his comm and pulls up the scheduling interface for the Senate joint session calendar. He stares at it for a long time. His hand rests on the desk beside the comm. He doesn't make the call. The vote that ends the Jedi Order's presence on Coruscant passes by a margin of 63%. Anakin doesn't call it an exile. The legislation doesn't use the word. Senate Resolution 9901, formally titled the Jedi Order Institutional Relocation and Civil Jurisdiction Clarification Act, runs to 47 pages of careful language establishing that the Jedi Temple, a structure occupying prime Coruscant real estate across 4 city blocks at the intersection of 3 major transit arterials, shall be transferred to Republic administrative jurisdiction, that the Jedi Order shall be offered a selection of alternative sites from a Republic-maintained list of available properties on 7 core world planets, and that this transfer serves the dual purpose of eliminating jurisdictional ambiguity in the capital's security operations and allowing the Order to pursue its peacekeeper mission unencumbered by the political and symbolic weight of a military-adjacent installation in the Republic's seat of government. 47 pages. The word exile appears nowhere in any of them. It is exile. Bail Organa votes against it. He votes against it in the full knowledge that his vote will not change the outcome. The count was visible 3 days before the session. The coalition Anakin's office assembled with the quiet efficiency that has characterized every political operation of this administration. Never coercive, always logical. Always arriving with arguments that are sound and motivations that are clean, and a conclusion that has been foregone since before the session was scheduled. Bail votes against it anyway because he believes in the record. Because 20 years from now, when someone excavates the legislative history of this period and tries to understand how it happened, he wants his name in the column that said no. He calms Mon Mothma from the Senate gallery afterward. 63%, she says. 63, he confirms. A pause. He's getting better at it. He's not calculating, Bail says. That is the thing he keeps returning to, the thing that makes this harder than it would be if Anakin were simply a cynical operator. That's what makes it. He genuinely believes every argument he makes. The relocation genuinely does eliminate jurisdictional ambiguity. The temple genuinely is a symbolic problem for civil security operations. Every premise is real. The conclusion just happens to remove the last institutional presence in the capital with any capacity to complicate his authority. Bail, Mon Mothma's voice carries the specific tone of someone about to say the true thing. We need to talk about what comes next. Not the Jedi. Us. Not on this channel, he says. No. She agrees. Not on this channel. Mace Windu receives the resolution's passage notification on a datapad in the temple's main training hall, where he has been watching a class of initiates. The youngest, 7 and 8 years old. Children who arrived at the temple after the war ended and have never known it any other way, practice basic lightsaber forms under Master Sindralig's patient instruction. He reads the resolution. He reads the margin. He puts the datapad face down on the bench beside him and watches the children for a long time. They are, he thinks, the argument. Not for resistance, not for political opposition. Not for any of the maneuvering that has occupied the last 4 months of his life. Just the argument for continuity. These children arrived at this temple because someone sensed the Force in them, and because their families trusted the Order with something irreplaceable. They are being taught, right now, in this room, that the Force is not a weapon, and not a political instrument, and not a mechanism of control, but a living thing that requires patience and stillness, and the specific courage of a being willing to feel rather than merely act. That teaching does not require this building. It does not require Coruscant. It does not require clone battalions or Senate commissions or any of the institutional apparatus that has been stripped away piece by piece over 4 months. He picks up his comlink and reaches Yoda in the temple's high garden. "You've seen it," he says. "Seen it, yes," Yoda says. "Expected it, also. The list has 7 properties. I've reviewed 3 of them. Alderaanian Highlands, a moon in the Outer Rim, a site on Naboo." Mace pauses. "Naboo, deliberate. That may be," Yoda says, his voice carrying the dry weight of a being who has watched political theater for 800 years and recognizes the staging even when he cannot prove it. "Or coincidence. Both possible. It doesn't matter which," Mace says. "No, it does not. Master Yoda." Mace watches the initiates below, small figures moving through their forms, focused and serious in the way of children who have been given something real to concentrate on. "Where do we go?" "Where we are needed," Yoda says, "and where we can remain what we are." A pause. "The Alderaanian Highlands. Organa will not allow what should not happen there to happen. And the landscape. Felt it. I have. The Force is present. Quiet, deeply present." Another pause. "Coruscant was always too loud. The moving takes 11 days. Not because there is so much to move, the Jedi travel, by tradition and by the practical demands of a mobile peacekeeper order light. It is because the temple contains things that cannot be hurried. The archive. 25,000 years of accumulated knowledge stored in formats that range from modern holographic records to physical manuscripts so old that the languages they are written in require 3 additional manuscripts to translate. The archivists work around the clock in rotating shifts, cataloging and packing with the focused urgency of people who understand that what they are handling is not replaceable. Anakin does not visit the temple during the 11 days. He tells himself this is appropriate, that his presence would be a provocation, that the Order deserves the dignity of its departure without the specific discomfort of the man responsible for that departure watching it happen. These reasons are real, and he believes them. They are also convenient, which he notices and does not pursue. On the 9th day, Padmé visits. She spends 4 hours in the archive, helping the junior archivists wrap and label the oldest manuscripts, working alongside 2 Jedi scholars who treat her with the careful courtesy of people who know exactly who she is married to and have chosen not to make that the governing fact of her presence. She doesn't bring staff. She doesn't bring a Senate recorder. She wraps manuscripts and asks questions about what she is handling and listens to the scholars' answers with the focused attention she brings to everything, and when she leaves, she doesn't make a statement to the HoloNet crews waiting outside. She calms Anakin from her speeder. "They're frightened," she says. "Not of you specifically, of what comes after you." He doesn't answer immediately. "They should focus on what's in front of them," he says finally. "Anakin." Her voice carries the specific weight of a woman who has been having versions of this conversation for 4 months and is not going to stop having it. They are a monastic order being relocated from their home. What's in front of them is what comes after you. Alderaan is safe. Organa, I know Alderaan is safe. That's not what I said. A pause. I said they're frightened of what comes after you, of the structure you're building and who inherits it and whether what you intend and what you're building are still the same thing. Her voice doesn't rise. It never rises. Are they? He has no answer that satisfies him. I'll call you tonight, he says. She ends the comm. On the 11th day, Obi-Wan Kenobi stands in the doorway of the council chamber for the last time. The room is empty, the 12 chairs still in their circle, the sunlight coming through the windows at its habitual angle, painting the stone floor in the habitual gold that Obi-Wan has seen in this room for 30 years. Someone will come for the chairs. They are part of the temple inventory, listed in the relocation manifest, scheduled for transport to the Alderaanian site. He doesn't sit. He stands in the doorway and looks at the circle of chairs and the empty light, and thinks about all the mornings he has sat in this room for decisions that felt enormous and that history has since reduced to footnotes. And all the footnotes that turned out to have been the important things. He thinks about Anakin. He thinks, I failed him. He has thought this before, across 15 years of various flavors of not quite right, and the thought has always carried a specific texture. The guilt of a master who knows he gave everything, and knows it wasn't enough, and cannot identify with confidence the precise moment where enough and everything diverged. He thinks, I didn't fail him. He is not Vader. There is no Vader. He killed the man who would have made him Vader, and is making himself something else instead. Something that doesn't have a name yet. Something the galaxy is going to have to live with for a very long time. He thinks. Both of those things are true. He steps back from the doorway. He pulls it closed behind him, gently, the way you close a door in a house where someone is sleeping. The latch catches with a sound that is very small in the corridor's silence. He walks toward the temple's main entrance, past the younglings' quarters, past the training halls, past the room of 1,000 fountains where the water is still running, because someone will need to turn it off, and that task hasn't been assigned yet, and so the water runs in the empty room as it has run for 1,000 years, indifferent to the question of who is listening. At the entrance, he stops. Yoda stands at the top of the temple steps, looking out at Coruscant, at the transit lanes and the towers, and the endless layered city that has been the Order's home, and its context and its complication for a millennium. Ready, are you? Yoda asks. No, Obi-Wan says. Good, Yoda says. Ready would mean we had accepted this. Accepted it. We have not. He turns and begins his careful descent of the steps, his staff tapping the stone. Endured it. Different thing, that is. They walk down the steps together, into the city, away from the temple, toward the transport that will carry them to Alderaan and the Highlands and whatever comes next, for an order that has survived 25,000 years, by understanding that survival is not the same as victory, and that the Force does not promise either. The temple behind them catches the afternoon light. It will be a Republic administrative complex by the end of the month. The water in the room of 1,000 fountains will run for 3 more days before someone remembers to turn it off. 3 years pass the way peace passes, quietly, and then, all at once. Coruscant gleams. This is the first thing visitors notice now, arriving through the upper atmosphere on commercial transports that run on routes cleared of wartime debris and military traffic for the first time in a decade. The planet gleams, its upper levels scrubbed and lit and maintained with the specific obsessive cleanliness of an administration that understands the semiotics of surfaces. The transit lanes move. The crime indices, published quarterly by the Chancellor's Civil Administration Office, decline each quarter with the metronomic regularity of a managed statistic, which they are, though the underlying reality they describe is also real. The streets of Coruscant's upper levels are genuinely safer than they were 4 years ago, which is a genuine good, purchased at a price that doesn't appear in the civil administration's quarterly reports. The vanguard units are everywhere, not oppressively, not the boots-on-necks visibility of an occupying force. They move through the levels in pairs and small units, gray and blue livery crisp, professional, courteous in their interactions with civilians, responsive to civil complaints with a speed that the old Republic security apparatus never managed. People feel safe around them. This is the intended effect, and it is genuinely achieved, and the fact that 6 million men wearing that livery answer to one person's genetic signature and no constitutional authority whatsoever does not register in daily life. Because it doesn't need to register in daily life. It only matters in the event of a crisis. It only matters if the man they answer to becomes the crisis. The free election has not been held. The Conditions Assessment Report, now in its 7th quarterly revision, runs to 300 pages and identifies ongoing instability in 9 Outer Rim systems, 2 unresolved Separatist remnant networks, and a trade destabilization index in 4 core world economies that the Chancellor's economic advisors have certified as incompatible with the integrity of a free galactic election. The report is thorough. The report is largely accurate. The report is also, in structure and conclusion, indistinguishable from a document designed to ensure that safe conditions are never quite fully achieved. Bail Organa has read all 7 versions. He has noted the differences between them. He has filed those notations in the place behind his sternum where they have been accumulating for 3 years, alongside Mon Mothma's carefully worded letters, and the quietly growing correspondence of 14 senators who meet, when they meet, on Alderaan, where Organa's hospitality and the Jedi Order's presence provide a setting that feels, without anyone explicitly saying so, like the correct place to discuss the future of a republic that is no longer quite a republic. He has not yet called it a rebellion. He is not ready to call it a rebellion. He keeps that word in a drawer and does not open the drawer and tells himself he is waiting for the right moment, which is what people tell themselves when they are afraid the right moment has already passed. The children are 3 years old. Luke runs before he walks into rooms, which Padmé has decided is his father's fault on the grounds that his father has never in his life entered a space without first calculating how quickly he could cross it. Leia does not run. Leia arrives at the threshold of rooms and surveys them with the specific measuring stillness of a person determining whether the room is worthy of her presence, which Anakin has decided is entirely her mother. They live in the Chancellor's residence in an apartment that Padmé designed with the deliberate warmth of someone creating a counterweight. Soft furnishings and cluttered bookshelves and the small productive chaos of 2 3-year-olds, placed in direct contrast to the formal architecture of executive power 3 levels below. She has stayed. She has stayed, and she has argued, and she has voted against him in open Senate sessions 7 times in 3 years, each vote a matter of public record. Each vote a demonstration that the Chancellor's wife is not the Chancellor's instrument. Whether it is enough, whether her presence inside the structure constitutes resistance or legitimization, is a question she puts to herself on certain nights and does not answer. Because the honest answer is that it is both, simultaneously, and she has decided that both is better than neither. She is teaching Leia to read. This is what she is doing when Anakin finds her on a Tuesday evening, sitting on the floor of the apartment's main room with Leia in her lap and a picture book open between them, sounding out words in the careful, patient rhythm of a woman who has been making complex things clear for her entire professional life and finds no task beneath that skill. Luke is asleep in the next room, exhausted by an afternoon of running. Anakin stands in the doorway for a moment before either of them sees him. He looks at his wife on the floor with his daughter and the book, and something moves through him that has no political valence whatsoever, no calculation, no management, no strategic dimension, just the knowledge of what this is, and that he has it, and that he built a galaxy-spanning executive apparatus, in some final accounting, so that this specific evening in this specific room could exist undisturbed. The knowledge sits in his chest like a stone and like warmth simultaneously. Leia looks up and sees him first. "Baba," she says, with the absolute authority of a 3-year-old identifying a fact. "Hi," he says. Padmé looks up. She reads his face. She can still read his face, after all of it, which he suspects is both the most important thing and the thing he has done the least to deserve, and she sees whatever is in it, and says nothing. Just lifts her chin slightly toward the window in the gesture that means go. "I'll come in a moment." He goes to the window. Coruscant at night is the closest thing to stars that a planet entirely covered in city can produce. A field of light extending in every direction, to every horizon, vertical and lateral, the luminescence of 10 trillion lives engaged in the ordinary business of existing. He has stood at versions of this window for 3 years. The view doesn't change. He changes, incrementally, in response to it. The window has become the place where he allows himself to think the thoughts he doesn't think in the office, the ones that don't resolve into action items or policy decisions or strategic assessments. He thinks, Obi-Wan was right. He has been thinking this for 3 years, specifically and honestly, in the way of a man who acknowledges a true thing without knowing what to do with it. The election has not been held. The conditions remain unsafe. He can feel, in the part of himself that has never been able to lie to itself, the difference between the conditions being unsafe and his own inability to locate the version of himself that releases what he holds. They have become, over 3 years, very difficult to distinguish. He thinks about Obi-Wan in the Highlands. He has not seen him since the temple. There have been no formal communications. The protocol agreement was suspended by mutual unspoken agreement 6 months after the relocation, replaced by nothing, which is its own kind of answer. He knows, through channels he doesn't examine too closely, that the order is intact on Alderaan, that children are being trained, that Yoda tends a garden in the highlands in the mornings and teaches in the afternoons, and has not, in 3 years, said a single public word about the Chancellor of the Republic. He thinks that silence is the most frightening thing in the galaxy. Padmé comes to stand beside him, close enough that their shoulders touch, which is a choice, which he notes. She got through 4 pages, Padmé says. That's 4 more than yesterday. She wanted to know why the letters made sounds instead of just being pictures. A pause. I told her it was so that words could carry farther. He looks at the city. I'm not going to hold the election, he says. He has not said this out loud before. He has known it for some time and has been testing whether saying it changes what it is. Padmé is quiet. I know, she says finally. I believe everything I told them, he says. The conditions, the instability. I believe it. I know you do. That doesn't make it right. No, she says. It doesn't. She looks out at the city beside him. Are you telling me because you want me to talk you out of it? He considers the question with the honesty it deserves. No, he says. She nods, once, slowly, the nod of a woman who has known this answer for some time and waited for him to know it too. Then I'll stay, she says. And argue with you. And vote against you when you're wrong, which will be often. And raise them, she means the children, she doesn't need to say it, to know what things cost. She pauses. That's what I have. It's enough, he says. She doesn't agree or disagree. She stands beside him at the window, and they look out at the city that is his and that is no one's, and that runs its quiet managed peace through the night below them, safe and watched and held. He is still at the window when she goes to bed. The city does not change. The vanguard units make their circuits. The transit lanes carry their traffic. Somewhere in the core, a quarterly conditions assessment is being revised. Somewhere in the Alderaanian highlands, an old master tends a garden in the dark, patient in the way of things that measure time in centuries, and understand that what cannot be undone must be outlasted. Anakin Skywalker stands at the window of the Republic he built, and looks out at the peace he purchased and holds. In the same 2 hands, everything he saved and everything it cost. He never fell. There was no Vader. There was no burning wreckage of a man inside a black suit, running on grief and rage and the memory of what he'd lost. There was only Anakin, clear-eyed and certain and full of love, building an empire in all but name with the patient diligence of someone who believed, and kept believing, that the right person holding the right power for the right reasons was not the thing the galaxy needed to fear. He was not wrong about the reasons. He was not wrong about the love. A galaxy of 10 trillion people sleeps tonight, in a peace it did not choose, and cannot escape, grateful and watched, and his. That is the whole of it. That is all of it. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.